My name is Shweta Shenoy, and I'm also known as the Pastry Corner on the internet. I'm an artist and teacher specializing in lettering and watercolor artwork. I spread the joy of creating through my art workshops. Hand lettering is the art of drawing letters where you can transform your regular letters and words into pieces of art. Hand lettering has gotten really popular in the last decade and now includes a wide number of styles and techniques, including fork calligraphy, brush lettering, block lettering, etc. But today we are going to explore whimsical style lettering, where you will learn how to add a fun and playful look to your words. First, let's take a look at the supplies that you will need today. You can use any kind of pen or marker or Sharpie that you have lying around at home. I personally like working with fine point pens like these by Micron that come in a bunch of different sizes. Sizes 03 and 05 are great for lettering. Now these are another set of pens by Tombow, the Tombow mono drawing pens. And again, these are in sizes 03 and 05. And one of the reasons why I like working with these pens is because they have, an extra fine nib that gives me a lot of control over my writing. If you don't have these particular type of pens, then like I mentioned, feel free to use any kind of pen that you already have. You also need any kind of pencil, an eraser, and a ruler. Really basic supplies. This is optional, but if you want to add a pop of color to your final project, then you can use any kind of colored markers that you have. These are my personal favorite, the ones by Tombow. These are dual brush pens, so I can use the brush side to color larger areas, and I can use the fine tip side to add any finer details. These come in a wide variety of colors, and one of the reasons why I like working with them. You could also use, simpler markers like these Crayola Super Tips that are widely available. Again, colors are completely optional. Your final project, you could do it on any kind of paper, printer paper, or maybe on a sheet, on a blank page on your journal or notebook. Again, I personally like working with Canson mixed media paper because the paper has a little bit of texture as well as weight to it. And so I'll be working on my final project on this particular type of paper. And last but not the least, you do need a copy of my Hand Lettering for Beginners Whimsical Style worksheet. You can either print this out or just even open it up on your computer and reference it. Let's take a quick look at what's inside this worksheet. There's a little bit of introduction about me and how you can connect with me on the internet, so feel free to check it out. There's also a detailed list of supplies along with a few links in case you're interested in purchasing any of them. And then we have our letters that we will be covering today. All of the letters A to Z. There are also a couple of composition samples to help you get started and to give you some ideas on what your final project could be. And there's also a blank guideline sheet at the end for you to practice any words or any phrases or even test out some composition. So go ahead and gather your supplies and let's start lettering. Now our base letters for the whimsical style are going to be the uppercase print alphabet. So that will be, A, B, C, and D. So a really simple font and something we're all familiar with. Now let's see how we can convert them into whimsical letters using 3 simple steps. Now step 1 is to write the letter as you normally would. So here's my uppercase print letter A. Step 2 is to identify the left side of your letter and make it a little bit bulky. And once I know which is the leftmost part of my letter, I am going to add these dashes at the top and bottom, so slightly extending it to the left, and then connect these two lines. Now immediately you can see here now that the left side of my letter A is a little bit bold and chunky. The third step is to add an embellishment of your choice. And we'll get to that in just a minute, but I want to show you another example real quick. So let me show you the letter B. Again, the first step is to write your letter as you normally would. The second step is to identify the left side of your letter and to make it a little bit wider or bulky. So again, I am going to extend the top and bottom with these small dashes, and then I'm going to connect these two lines. And the third step is going to be decorating the letters. Now there are a couple of different ways to thicken the left side of your letters. One of the reasons why I like adding these dashes first is because it gives me a lot of control. It's much easier for me to add these two lines and then connect them versus trying to add this parallel line to begin with and then connect it. So you can do it both ways, they're both right, but it's just a matter of figuring out what is easier for you to do. And for me personally, it's always easier to start off with these dashes at the top and bottom of my letter and then connecting them with a straight line. All right, so now let's look at the third step of our letters, which is actually the fun part where you get to embellish or decorate your letters. Now there are a bunch of different ways how you can do that. One option is you could leave it as is. So look at this letter over here in the final step. You could just stop at this step if you want, if that's what you prefer. So that will still give your letters a unique look, but also keep it really simple and elegant. The other option is you could fill it in completely. So here I'm just using my black marker and filling it in. And when you do that, you can see that you have transformed the letters significantly because now you have these contrasting thin and thick lines, and the left side of your letter definitely looks a lot more bold and heavier as we intended. So if you want, you could always fill it in with black or maybe another color of your choice. Another option, which is my personal favorite and really fun, is to add a bunch of doodles or illustrations inside this area. So for example, for this particular letter, I can add some tiny circles. You could also add lines, or you could add a line, a straight line, and add some fun dots at the bottom. I have provided quite a few options for you. So as you can see here on the first page here, I have kept it really simple but added tiny little doodles inside each of my letters and just given you a bunch of different ideas on how you can decorate your letters. On the second sheet here, I have showed you how you can actually fill it in if you want a bold and chunky look, and that can either be in black if you want to keep it really classic and elegant, or you can add a bit of color as well, and look at how your letters pop when you add a little bit of color to it. Another option is you could use a combination of both, right? I have filled it in with color first and then added some fun illustrations on top in black. So again, these are just some ideas to help you get started. This is not the only way to embellish or decorate your letters. And as we work through these letters in the next few minutes, try and challenge yourself, and try and exercise your creative muscle and see how many different ways you come up with to embellish your letters. Practice is key when it comes to hand lettering, so that's why I have created these beginner friendly worksheets for you. The other thing that you're going to realize as we work through our letters one by one is that most of the letters are going to be pretty straightforward, but some of them are going to be a little bit tricky and might require you to break some rules and adapt. And so we are going to look at them on a case-by-case basis. Now, to practice your letters, you can either use a pencil or your fine point pen or any other pen that you have, but I will be using the fine tip. I'll be using the fine tip side of my Tombow dual brush pen, because this way my letters are going to be bold and dark enough for you to see. So here's my letter A again. This is step number 1. Step number 2 is to add those lines and connect them. And for the sake of this demo, I'm going to repeat the same embellishment that I've done in the examples here, but feel free to play around and try your own embellishment. So there's my letter A. You can practice every letter a couple of times before moving on to the next one. But I am going to go ahead to the next letter. Here's my letter B. It's okay if your letters are not super straight initially. You are hand drawing them one by one, so it's but natural for letters to be a little bit wonky, and not look super straight as I have them in my sample here. But things will get better with time, and that is why practice is key. The next letter is C. And you probably noticed that C is a little bit different than the previous 2 letters that we have worked with, because it doesn't have a straight line on the left side, but instead it has a curve. And C is not the only letter that falls in this category. We have some more letters like G, J, O, Q. In fact, any letter that has the symbol I next to it, these are all of the letters that fall into the same category, where they don't have a line on the left side but have a curve instead. So let me show you how I work with these type of letters. Now the first step, how I like to approach them, is to actually make it a little bit wider than I would normally write them. So instead of a super skinny C, I'm actually exaggerating the width and making it a little bit wider, and then I go ahead and add a line inside. That's why I have the letter I next to these these kind of letters, because it's an indicator that the additional line or the thickness is actually going to be inside of the letter instead of outside of the letters. What I mean by that is, the other letters, we're actually going to thicken it from the outside of the letter, right? So we added this line outside of A and then thickened it. But these letters, I find it easier to add the additional line or the second line inside the letter, because this way I'm not altering the shape of my letter. Now, if I were to add the line or the thickness outside of my letter, you can still do it. It's not wrong. But I find that when I add the thickness outside of my letter, it gets a little bit tricky for me to maintain the shape of the letter. I find that when I add it inside, it's a much cleaner look, and that's why I prefer adding it inside. And the other thing I want you to keep in mind is that when you add the thickness by adding the second line, try and maintain the shape of your letter. So you want something looking like this and not like this. You see, this is a super straight line, and this is not the kind of style that we are working with. We want to make sure that we are maintaining the shape of the letter when we add this additional line. All right, so coming back to my letter C here, making it a little bit wide and adding the line and the embellishment. So next we have the letter G, and again it has the symbol I next to it. So it's going to be very similar to C over here. That means I'm going to first exaggerate the letter a little bit and then add this line on the inside and then add a few dots. The last letter on the first page here is I, and I is also, a little bit different, or at least the way I like to deal with it is a little bit different. So notice that I has these dashes at the top and bottom, and in the first step here, it is represented by these dotted lines, and the reason I have done that is because I don't add this line until the second step. So if I add this line to begin with, then I find that when I add the second line, I have to go back and adjust it a little bit. And then it might not be even sometimes. So that's why I like to start off with, the straight line first, add the other line to increase the thickness, and then just go ahead and add these dashes at the top and bottom. So here's my letter I. Here's my first line. Now I'm going to extend it on the left side, and then I'm going to add these dashes to complete the I. And this one, I have a fun little doodle here. I actually have a heart inside. So there you go. All right, so the next letter is S, and S is a little bit tricky, I'll be honest, because S has this spine over here, the center line, which is sometimes tricky in itself, and then to add this other line is also going to be a little bit tricky. So let me tell you how I work with it. So when I write my letter S, I like to make the top a little bit narrow and widen the base. So notice how the top half, this curve over here is, a little bit narrow here. It's not very wide, but it's really wide at the bottom. So this is how I start off with the letter, and then I add the second line over here. And this way, when I added the second line, I feel like it's still balanced, and now it's pretty much even on both ends of the letter. If I start with an even letter, this one over here is pretty even to begin with, but when I add the second line, notice how it's wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. And if I'm working with a pencil, then definitely I can do this a couple of times. I can erase these lines until I'm happy. But let's say you're working with a marker to begin with, then it helps to just make the top narrow and widen the bottom, and then go ahead and add this line. Practice this a few times, because like I said, S is a tricky letter, and getting the exact proportion for the top half and the bottom half will come with practice. So definitely feel free to practice this a bunch of times so that you get a little bit more comfortable. All right, so let me see if I can replicate it here. Next, we have the letter X. And again, notice, I have the dotted line here, which means I'm not going to add this in the first step. So in fact, I'm going to add this line over here. So because technically this line over here is the left side of the letter. So here's my line. And then I'm going to extend it, add that second line over here. So once I have the left side of the letter figured out, then I find it easier to add the other line. Again, there's no right or wrong here. You can start off with the letter X, completely, and then play around to find the right proportion. You can definitely do that. And like I said, if you're working with a pencil, you can always erase it and try again until you're happy. Right, so next we have the letter Y, and Y is the only letter where we're breaking all the rules. All right, you will notice that on the letter Y, the thickness is actually on the right side. And the only reason we are doing that is because that way the letter is going to look a little bit more balanced, because we are going to add the thickness on the longer edge or the longer side of the letter Y. I didn't make a lot of these rules, so I probably don't have better explanation for you as to why it's on the right side and not the left side. But my understanding is that the letter looks a little bit more balanced when the thickness is on the longer side of the letter. So just remember that Y is where you break all the rules. So, if you want, you can put a little bit X here. And the thickness is on the right side of the letter. Next, we have the letter Z, and it's our last letter. And notice again, we have those dotted lines. So that means we are not going to add them initially, we're going to add them later. So I'm going to add this line over here. I'm going to extend it and widen it first. and then I'm going to add these dashes. Again, this is just a little hack that I find is helpful to balance out the shape of the letter. All right, so congratulations. You have worked through these letters one by one. Um, Feel free to take your time working through these letters. There's no rush. The idea is to, practice these letters mindfully and, build muscle memory in adding those extra lines and adding that heaviness to the left side of your letters. And at the same time, also exercising your creative muscle so that you try and figure out different ways to embellish your letters. Now that you have learned how to write your letters in the whimsical style, let's use them to create a quick hand-lettered project. For your final project, you can choose to write a single word or a short phrase. To help you get started, I have shown you a few different ways how you can use the whimsical letters in your hand-lettered project. Even a single word can be a complete piece of artwork when you add the right embellishments. For the word love here, I have chosen these fun little hearts, and for the word breathe, I decided to add some leaves. So in both cases, I'm choosing decorations that kind of complement my word. Whimsical style is also a great option to use when you want to emphasize a certain word in your phrase. So that's what I have done in these remaining examples. Notice how I've also tried to mix up the lettering styles a bit. The one thing I would recommend is that no matter what kind of embellishment you choose for your letters, try and keep it consistent across the word so that it's not too distracting. So go ahead and pick a word or a short phrase that resonates with you and letter it in whimsical style. The phrase that I have chosen today is dream big, so that's what I'm going to letter. Congratulations on completing the Whimsical Letters course. I hope you had a relaxing time working on your final project. Now that you have learned the basics of hand lettering, you can create all year long. Customize your greeting cards, gift tags, and even your journal. The possibilities are endless. Happy lettering!